So for those of you who are not familiar with FIPS, just to let you know we're in the Northeast and Southwest Pennsylvania in the city of Pittsburgh. And here's some of the things that I'd like to talk with you about today, sort of go through the journey of some of the things that we've done to get off of using fossil fuels as much as we can. Starting with in 2005, when we opened our Welcome Center, we were seeking LEED certification, and at that time we were required to commit to using 10% renewable energy. We decided, why stop at the building? Why stop at 10%? Let's do 100%. And then we said, why stop at the building? Let's do our whole campus. So since 2005, we've been purchasing renewable energy credits to offset all the electricity that we use on our entire campus. In 2006, we got rid of all the plastic disposable serviceware in our cafe. Not exactly related to climate change so much, but it is a fossil fuel product that we wanted to get rid of. And then we also started composting all the cafe waste, both pre and post consumer waste at that time. In 2009, we stopped selling bottled water. Again, another major source of plastic pollution, single-use plastic bottles. And in 2010, we started to offset all the carbon we use that we produce from heating all of our buildings. And that's a pretty substantial amount for us, since we have an old single pane glass conservatory, which requires a lot of heat. So we thought, that would be something that would be important for us to offset that carbon. And we've varied the different carbon trackers that we've used over time, where we use those to calculate how much we have to offset, and we've purchased offsets on the open market for offsetting that carbon. In 2012, when we opened our new Tropical Forest Conservatory, new Center for Sustainable Landscapes, that was our first commitment to doing a zero energy building. And that building, we started with committing to making this building be zero energy. So we focused first on passive strategies, such as natural daylight and natural ventilation in the design of the building. And then we supplemented that with geothermal, solar panels, and then also a 10 kW wind turbine. The total solar for this building is 125 kW. That building was the first of our commitment to doing zero energy buildings. We've since built a modular classroom that's also zero energy, that has it's about a little over 6.5 kW of solar panels. And then in last year, we opened our exhibit staging center, which has a 64 kW of solar panels. So together, we have a total of 205 kW solar panels for our entire campus, which is a small portion of what we use, but it's something that we're definitely moving in the direction of doing that. And right now, all three of those buildings are zero energy buildings. In 2015, we decided to divest from fossil fuels from all of our investments. We've done that ever since that time. And in 2016, we recognized that while it was great to be building all these new buildings that are zero energy, we still have this old conservatory from 1893, which I like to say is probably one of the best examples of the worst kinds of buildings you could possibly build. A single pane glass house designed to grow tropical plants in a temperate climate, which is crazy by today's standards, but that's what we have, and that's a historic building. So there's really not a lot we can do to changing that, although we did, through the study, determine there were some things that we could do that could make the building be a lot more efficient and still maintain the historic character of the building. So some of the things that we'll be looking at doing as we go forward in the future is sealing off the building for air infiltration. We'll be switching from steam heat to hot water heat, which will give us a lot more control. There are some different types of fans and heating systems that we can use to circulate hot air through the building, which would make the building be a lot more efficient as well. So those are some of the things over the next couple of years that we'll be working on to get that building be a lot more efficient than it is right now. In 2017, we decided we wanted to engage our visitors in addressing climate change. So we started our Green Power Drive, where we teamed up with a local green energy provider to allow people to switch to green electricity while they're at FIPS. And so far, we've had over 5,500 families switch to green electricity while they're visiting FIPS, which amounts to a little over, I think, 70,000 barrels of oil not being burnt each year to produce all the heat for those buildings. We lined our front walkways, you can see here, with 16 oil barrels to demonstrate the amount of carbon that would be produced from each homeowner if they were to just stay on traditional electricity that they're getting now from Duquesne Light, which is our local provider. The idea here is, nobody knows what a ton of carbon dioxide looks like, but we always talk about tons of CO2 that are being produced. So the typical Pennsylvania household produces enough CO2 to power their home that equals 60 barrels of oil being burnt. So again, this is a way to make it more easier for people to understand exactly what we're talking about. And this effort has actually slowed down since we've been closed, or we've really limited attendance since June when we reopened. So that number's gone way down. But up until we actually hit the 5,000 mark, I think about last January. So it's actually been a pretty successful program for us. In 2018, we further adopted a program to reduce single-use plastic in the garden. In 2019, we started the Climate Toolkit as a way to help all of us share ideas that we're doing to address climate change. And hopefully, after this presentation today, many of you will want to get your gardens up on the sharing what you're doing and get on the Climate Toolkit so we can really make this a much bigger effort than it is right now. In 2019, we also switched a lot of our equipment, our garden equipment, to electric, switched from gas power to electric, which includes mowers, blowers, and trimmers. And in 2020, we started to change the way we do our carbon offsets. Right now we've been purchasing carbon offsets and giving that money to other organizations to reduce their carbon. We decided, why not put that money towards projects at FIPS? So we've been calculating the amount of carbon that we need to offset each year using the calculators that are available on the web, setting that money aside, and we're going to be using that to purchase more solar at FIPS. This is not exactly a sanctioned program, but to us it makes a lot of sense, and it gives us an opportunity to really offset the carbon we're producing at FIPS by actually putting in solar at FIPS. So that's one of the main programs that we're working on right now. So those are some of the key things that I wanted to share with you that we're doing at FIPS. I'd now like to turn it over to Michael. He can tell us what they're doing at Norfolk, and then Jeff will follow up with that, and then we'll take questions at the end. Michael?
Thanks, Richard. So I want to talk about how easy it was for us to make some of these changes and some of the resistance we discovered to make some of these changes, as a way for you folks to learn what we did and how we did it and how you might want to apply it at your institution. When I came back from the FIPS and I saw the oil barrels lining the front entrance where every single person walks by, and I thought, wow, that is really putting your money where your mouth is. I mean, are you going to turn away donors? Are you going to upset some people? What is your board going to think about? I mean, all of these things ran through my mind. And then I went home and I said, yeah, but you know what? We've been talking a lot about the environmental crisis and climate, and the time for talk is over. We need to start walking and running to the solution. So I said, well, what can we do at my institution? And maybe lining a walkway with oil barrels wasn't going to be it, but there were certainly things that we could do. So back in January of 2018, I challenged the staff which included the gift shop and our cafe operations, to ban the sale of bottled water. So the first thing I got pushback from the cafe was she showed me a list of her top 5 moneymakers by markup, and bottled water was, I think, 1 or 2, because there's a huge, a per price bottle of water is probably 10 cents, 20 cents, and they're selling it for $2 or $3. Incidentally, little wrap things of fudge were number 2. So sell those little things of grab and go fudge at your cash register, and they're a huge moneymaker. And I said, yeah, okay, so we're not going to make money on water, but we'll make money someplace else. And maybe this isn't how we should be making our money. And let's look at it that way. So we can't look at it as lost revenue. We have to look at it as opportunity for revenue elsewhere, as well as educating people. And we also got pushback from visitors and customers. They wanted to buy a bottle of water. They did not want soda. They did not want iced tea. They did not want something else that came in a container. They wanted water. And we needed to really educate them as to why we weren't, why we were offering free, clean, safe water all over campus. Through bottle refill stations. We also made sure we were proactive and let people know on the website, on Facebook, and as many avenues as we could, that when you visit the garden, you should bring your own refillable container. Yes, we will sell them in the gift shop, but bring your own. I also tasked the gift shop. I said, can you find a refillable container that would have been the same cost as a bottle of water, and at least meet the customer there. So if the bottled water was $3, is there a refillable container you could sell them for $3? Because it's a lot different to say, no, we're not selling bottled water, but you can buy this $10 or $20 Yeti. I mean, that's a tough jump for any customer. And eventually, I think a lot of the angry, I can't buy bottled water here stuff dissipated. We followed that up with just a few months later in July. I tend to use the milestones to either the first of the year to institute a policy or the fiscal year. I think it just gets everybody on the same page. All of the department heads can agree. You've kind of got a roadmap, and you can kind of also tell other people, okay, that's when we're starting. So July 1 of the same year, single-use plastic ban. So that was similar to Richard's in disposable cutlery, things like that, either in our own food service operations or from caterers. And the reason for that was, again, it's not only waste in the waste stream and plastic, but plastic's a petrochemical, and there's a carbon element to that. A lot more pushback from the cafe and food service. We outsource our food service operations. So of course they're like, what are we going to do? You have to show them alternatives. So staff had alternatives for them. I bought them a case of cups that were compostable that they could use when people said, what do you mean I can't buy a bottled water and I don't want to buy a refillable bottle? Can't you just give me a cup? So I said, you know what? I'll buy you a case. So, in other words, greasing the wheel a little bit to make everybody sort of have an easier way to get on board. And that went a long way with the cafe to be on board with what we wanted to do. Incidentally, they already had a refill station built into their cafe operation. So it was very easy to just hand the guests a cup that they could refill themselves. In July of 2019, we had been talking about renewable energy for a long time. And it was always we're next to the airport, so I can't necessarily put up wind turbines. Solar panels, you need a relatively newer roof or a 20-year roof to put solar panels up, or you need a lot of land mass. So solar wasn't a perfect option for us either, but we wanted to get to 100% renewable. And we always thought that cost was going to be an issue, that buying the credits or buying green energy was going to be really expensive. And as it is, I have a $10,000 a month electric bill. So how can you spend even more money on electricity? It was always that, oh, it would be great, but we just can't do it right now. So finally, as part of the budgeting process, I turned to my facility manager and I said, will you actually investigate how much it will be for us to buy 100% renewable energy, and we'll think about building into the budget? Well, he came back and it turns out it was $1,000 a month. That's it, $1,000 a month to buy 100% renewable energy through our local energy provider. So that's $12,000 a year. And I thought to myself, if I can't figure out how to raise or earn or make $12,000 a year, I should not be the CEO of this or probably any organization. So we can make this work. And we put it into the budget and it's done. It's automatic now, 100% renewable energy since July of 2019. We also turned at that point to our Pepsi machines out in the garden. We've got a large campus, 175 acres. So, we need beverage options out and about, not just water. People still want to buy a soda, as well as our outsourced cafe operation. And we said, packaging also counts. So we want everything in the most recyclable and lowest footprint packaging, which ideally is aluminum. Aluminum is the most recycled element on earth. It's very easily recycled. It's very lightweight for shipping. It's much better than glass. So we said, we'd like you to pivot to no more plastic at all in containers and go to aluminum or glass. This summer, post-COVID, again, July 1 will be the launching date. We will go with all aluminum. So there'll be no glass at all anywhere on campus packaging anything. It's really heavy. They're not really recycling as much glass as they used to. And aluminum will be the better. Ideally, again, everyone would just reuse their own container and do that. Paired with all of that is you need to tell the story. So you not only need to educate folks who come to your institution about what and why you're doing, but you also need to sell it to them outside. So in all of our newsletters, we talk about how they can make the switch at home to renewable energy. And we have a link on our website so we can say, go to NBG Green. They click there. There's the local energy provider. There's other energy aggregators. Arcadia Power is one that's approved for us in Virginia, where they can offset 100% of their home energy with wind for only $5 a month. I mean, why would you not do that? Arcadia used to offer a program where you could get half of your home wind power through wind for no charge. If you wanted 100%, I think it was like a penny and a half more a kilowatt or something like that. They've now switched where it's a flat fee of $5, and I think that starts next month. You set up through AutoPay via credit card, and again, it's automatic and it's easy. So just like Richard's oil barrels, and I think he forgot to mention, he also gave a free membership. If you switched to green power on site, you got a free membership to come back to his garden. So what a huge incentive that is. I can't do that. We're not as big as the FIPS. We're certainly not as rich as the FIPS is. And all of that, all that oil and coal and steel money that they have back there. But there's certainly other things that you can do. And that's what we do. We push out the information and give you a link so you can instantly click on it and you're right there. I think the more that people can do it quickly and easily, the better they're going to do it. You've got to offer them the option. We've been really pushing the book Drawdown too. Drawdown is a phenomenal book. We put it in our newsletter. We sell it in our gift shop. And we always pivot to that too. So when I have the staff that want to do yet another article or a shout out about recycling, I turn to them and I say, where is recycling on the drawdown list? It is way the hell down there. Recycling is not going to move the needle. Recycling is not going to save us. Recycling was 20 years ago. We are 20 years too late. So let's talk about something in the top 10. Meatless Monday. So in our new member brochure, a member magazine that's going out, we're going to push Meatless Mondays. We want to reduce meat consumption. Meat and food waste is a huge driver of carbon. So there's lots of little things that we can do to educate our visitors. It's got to be something that they do when they go home that changes behavior and moves the needle. It's not just what we do as an institution. Collectively, all of the institutions on these two screens, if you added up our visitation, can you imagine? And if only 10% of those people did something, still, could you imagine what they would do? Lastly, I'll leave you with, we're planning a big construction project to start next spring, a new entrance pavilion to do away with our drive-in system. We're doing a 30,000 square foot conservatory that'll help us conserve cycads and conifers in addition, cactus and cycads in addition to the work that we're doing around conifer preservation. We're looking at some real bleeding, I'm calling it not even cutting edge, but bleeding edge technology. One of them is we're doing bio cement. So they're actually cement that's grown for us. It's a company called BioMason. They're out of the Research Triangle. They're in Durham, North Carolina, and they're literally growing cement, super incredibly low carbon, and it mimics calcification in corals, and lots of other cool stuff. Those, of course, will be examples that we can use to teach folks who come to us too. I read a new statistic about concrete. It consumes something like it creates 10% of the world's carbon emissions, which is huge. Yeah, concrete is just an awful, awful thing. So with that, I will hand it off to Jeff, who's going to talk about what they're doing at Mount Cuba.
Yeah, before Jeff goes, I just want to let people know if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And that's because that's how we'll be answering most of the questions. All right, thanks. Go ahead, Jeff.
Joe, is it possible for me to share my screen?
You should have screen sharing enabled, I think.
How's that?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, if I can get to slideshow mode. I just put together a few slides. It turns out our brand new fancy font is not enabled on this computer, so they look kind of generic. Anyway, we are at Mount Cuba Center, which is in northern Delaware. It's greater Philadelphia area. We have a property of about 1,083 acres, about 50 acres of horticultural gardens, and then about 1,000 acres of natural areas that we manage. Our mission is to inspire an appreciation for the beauty and value of native plants, and to also then inspire people to go home and take action and become conservators themselves. So we're also about inspiring people to appreciate nature and then to go home and take action. A number of things related to the climate toolkit that we have adopted, some of which we've adopted, some of which we were already doing. One thing we were already doing is fossil-free horticulture. About 8 years ago, we adopted a campus-wide composting program. We now compost just about 100% of all of our organic material, everything except disease stuff that we need to get rid of before the diseases spread. But we only use organic fertilizers, and we, being a native plant garden, interested in pollinators and wildlife, we don't use any insecticides. We use targeted pesticides on invasive plants, and that's about it. We have a brand new we're hoping to make net zero greenhouse for plant production that is currently in the final elements of a design phase. We are meant to start building it when the permitting is complete early in 2021, and it'll be done and ready for plants come 2022. But we're very hopeful that we will be able to make it net zero through the use of solar panels that are going to be on the roof here. And then we also, in an adjacent staff parking lot, we're going to have covered parking with photovoltaic cells on the top of that, which will be nice. Covered parking is always nice, especially if it has solar panels. And then the heating and cooling in the building is going to be accomplished through geothermal. It'll take us about 50 geothermal wells based on the projections for the heating and cooling constraints. So then it'll take us about a year of monitoring to try to verify that it is actually functioning at a net zero energy consumption. So that's going to be a big project, and we're hopeful that we can make it. But in any event, at the very worst, it'll be a very, very low energy building. But the goal is to try to demonstrate that you can do a production greenhouse and make it independent of outside electricity. We are also, in conjunction with this construction project, this is all part of the first phase of a master plan build out that we're engaged in. The greenhouse is one of the larger components. The other large component is a new visitor parking lot and entry experience. And in conjunction with that, We're going to be building significant capacity all around the parking lot to build and expand electric vehicle charging stations. So we don't need a lot of them right away because there's just not that many people coming with electric cars, especially not from far enough away to need a charge between coming and going. But as that happens, we are building in the future capacity to be able to expand it over time. We are also transitioning our fleet towards electric vehicles. That's primarily so far been in the work vehicles around the campus, trying to move from gasoline and diesel powered work vehicles. This is a vehicle we're going to be getting next year because we're going to be opening up trails in our natural lands for visitation to expand the guest experience and allow people to hike over some of the 1,083 acres that we have. So we're going to need a guest experience vehicle just to be able to get out there in case anybody, slips and falls and twists an ankle or something, and to monitor what's going on. So we're going to be getting a semi-rugged electric golf cart that goes out there. There's an interesting bias that I find with gasoline vehicles, especially for work vehicles. People often say that an electric vehicle just can't do what you need it to do. More and more that's just not the case. And you'll see in a second that we're also working towards the electric equipment question as well. I saw Nancy Kartz had a question, I think, about blowers. We might have some help for you. We just purchased this amazing, beautiful electric lawnmower. We haven't actually received it yet. This was our grounds manager taking a test drive of it's an all electric wide frame lawnmower. It apparently will go for just about 8 hours on a charge. So that is our first foray into kind of larger electric equipment. And currently, the cost premium is still pretty significant over a traditional gas mower. But this is one area where we wanted to both experiment and see how well it works, and also kind of feel like we're helping lead the charge of early adopters. And the more of us that kind of take the plunge, the quicker the economies of scale will work in our favor, and the prices will start to come down. In addition to this, we have been looking at blowers. And what we have determined is, based on the current battery life of them, we don't think that we can use them for our heavy duty blowing operations, but we do think that there may be some light blowing that we could use them for when we're just kind of refreshing our trails and pathways through the gardens. They wouldn't be as much use in kind of getting sort of significant leaf blowing done in leaf season, but for day-to-day cleanup, we think they might work. So we're going to experiment with a couple of those next year as well. We also have switched to 100% sustainably produced electricity just through our electricity provider. There were some options, and when we looked, the cost differential for us here where we are in Delaware was like pennies. So it was really easy to make the switch. We hardly noticed a difference in our operating budget from making that switch. And we somehow, I think our contract just changed. Until just recently, apparently we were getting our power from a wind farm in Texas. I no longer know the geographic location of our wind generation, but it is. We're assured that we're getting the 100% sustainable. It's as easy as signing up if you were just a household that wanted to switch your provider to a sustainable. And as to the FIPS program, membership program, I know Richard was very generous in sharing the details of how they work that program. And we actually talked to our electrical sort of providers in the area, and and we don't have the high visitation to justify that. Basically what happens is the company comes and tables on site, and we're not able to do that on a day-to-day basis. But what we're hopeful to do is when we have like our busier event days, to be able to have them come out for those and offer a fairly similar kind of a deal where basically you discount a membership as a incentive for people to sign up for sustainable energy, as long as they do it on site while they're there. It's kind of like the get them while the iron is hot philosophy. So we are very pleased that we're now getting all of our energy or our electricity from sustainable sources. We also started a staff task force that we call MCC Grows, which was just getting itself going when the pandemic happened, and we were all sort of separated off site, and it hasn't been quite as impactful as we had hoped this year, but we're hopeful to get back in action next year. But we also have a number of staff volunteering opportunities. This was a tree planting, a reforestation project. We do quite a bit of reforestation in our natural lands. I don't think we've ever actually calculated the carbon sequestration potential and from those efforts, but I'd be interested. One thing that I would like to learn is we've been interested in looking at carbon benchmarking. And I know, Richard, you mentioned that you were using just some of the online tools that are available. I think it'd be really great to know what tools you guys are finding useful, because there's so many of them, and they really seem to vary widely. So it would be useful for all of us, I think, to know what the most user-friendly and authoritative tools are for trying to benchmark what your carbon is, because we'd like to seek to accomplish some of the goals of, say, decreasing your carbon footprint by 25, 50, 75%, but we're not sure what the best way to measure where we're at now is, in order to be able to know how to make those changes over time, and what changes will get us there most effectively. So I think some of that guidance would really be helpful to us. I think that was my last slide. So that's it. I'm happy. I guess we're all going to be happy to answer questions.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you. And actually, Annie is actually working on a new blog post on how to measure your carbon. So we'll be putting that out pretty soon. I'd like to open it up to any questions that people have. If you put them in the chat, and Annie's going to moderate for us. Annie, what's our first question?
First question is, can you recommend an electric leaf blower that can handle heavy use in the fall? I know Jeff talked about it a little bit, but is there any other input that we want to talk about?
So I know Stihl, S-T-I-H-L, you all know Stihl. They're headquartered here in Virginia Beach. They have a new line of electrics that's really fantastic. So they've been to the garden and they've done a couple commercials filmed at the garden, and then in exchange we get a donation from them, including, I say, any equipment they bring, they have to leave. So they just left their whole latest line of electrics, and it's really good stuff. It's just like electric cars. It's like any other battery technology. The tech keeps getting better and better and better. So the power is there, the longevity is there. Maybe a leaf blower isn't going to be like a gas blower, but again, it's the trade-off. Do you really want gas blowers anyway? So I would encourage you to check out the Stihl line. And my staff have been happy with it, definitely, including electric lawnmowers, just little electric hand cuts where the big riding mowers can't get in.
So does anyone else have any other input for this question?
If Nancy wants to email me, or if anybody wants to email me, I can sort of give you the contacts that we've found.
What was the mower brand that you used in the slides?
Oh gosh, I would have to get that for you. I don't
Jeff,
know.
maybe when you email those, maybe send them to Annie too, and we'll post them on the website.
Okay, I will.
So during this presentation, we actually also had a discussion about if gardens should choose aluminum bottled water versus plastic. I know that Phipps eliminates all plastic water use in in their food service. And I know that also Michael had a bit of a discussion as well with that. Do we want to talk about that anymore?
I just think that it's not necessarily the package that the water comes in. It's the point that water from the tap is safe, it's filtered, and it doesn't need to be then pumped somewhere else, put in a container, shipped to the destination, and monetized to the consumer. I think it's more about the transportation, shipping, and packaging as a carbon polluter, as opposed to what it comes in. Because we did have the cafe come to us and say, hey, there's water in a paper box now, and we can do milk crates, milk boxes of water, and can't we sell that? And I said, no, it's not about the packaging. It's about that we don't really need to package it, period. It's free and local and low carbon that way. The only other thing I wanted to tack on is, if you guys are looking at renewable energy at your institutions, feel free to reach out to the companies to negotiate a better price. We did that. So whatever their price was on the website, we actually called and said, hey, can you work with us on a better price? They were a donor to the garden anyway, so we had a relationship. They ended up giving us the price for municipalities. So whatever they charge a municipal organization to buy power at renewable energy prices, is they offered that to us. They said, hey, we can justify that you guys get that rate. So it never hurts to ask. If the money is a stumbling block, call and try and negotiate a better rate.
In the meantime, I found the mower. The mower is from Mean Green Mowers. And the backpack blowers we were looking at are from Oregon product.
We have some green mowers and blowers too, that we'll put that information on the website as well.
Then this question is actually for Richard specifically. So how do you offset your heating in carbon in this?
Well, we actually, up until this past year, we were using a carbon calculator that we got off the web, and then we're going on the web. There are certified places that you can buy carbon offsets. I think the Nature Conservancy is one of the more popular ones. But like I said, this year we decided, why don't we just take this money that we're helping somebody else offset their carbon with, use it to offset our carbon in the future, and offset the amount of electricity we're going to have to keep buying off the grid. So we've been setting that money aside now so that we will be able to purchase more solar panels to install on site. So that's a strategy we're working on right now. And again, we'll continue to use the carbon calculators. I'm not exactly sure which one we're using right now, but we can get that information and post that on the web as well.
And then what tools are you using for your benchmarking for carbon? So as Richard has said, I'm creating a post about that. But for just one point, an initial, I think the best way to create an initial benchmark is having an energy audit to see what you're currently producing. And all of that will be on the website. And then I'm going to point this one to Richard as well. So this kind of goes off of this. So are you accounting for events in your energy usage?
Right now, we're not. Right now, we started with the buildings, heating the buildings. This past year, we started to include all travel, staff travel, offset all the travel. I know some organizations are even offsetting their visitor travel for the visitors that come to their organization. We haven't done that yet. But I'd like, this is a journey where all of us have to start somewhere and have to start doing something. So I think you need to find out where is the best place for you to start based on your organization and what your particular community is like and what your situation is like. But hopefully we'll get to those other areas as well very soon.
And one of the last questions is, does anyone have any experience or wisdom to share about using public art to inspire environmental action at your garden?
We're bringing Wash to Shore to the garden next summer. She's I think it's a Portland, Oregon artist, or Northwest somewhere. And she makes these larger than life sculptures with ocean plastic that are really spectacular. And part of that was we collected our own ocean plastic here, about 40 pounds worth, and shipped it to her to create a sculpture of an eagle with a Manhattan in its talon that we'll display next summer. So that's certainly, a way to use art. And it's an exhibit that we will pay to bring in, just like we brought in other exhibits. So
I think I saw her at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
yeah, washedashore.org is her website.
Yeah, that really is great.
And this is actually for Jeff. Nancy wants to see your dog real quick. She would like to see what dog you had, and then we'll get back to our last question about advice.
He already had a star appearance and he just took off. So
Okay, so one last question I would like to ask all three of you is, what advice would you give a garden that wants to begin a transition to renewable energy?
Well, I think I already started that one. I think just start making calls and finding out from your providers what they can provide. If cost is an issue for you, see if you can get one of your donors to step up for it. I mean, I think we really have to start thinking about this as not something that's optional. It's really something that really should just be standard business practice for us, particularly in botanical gardens, because we care about conservation, we care about biodiversity, we care about habitats. If you look at all the reasons why much of our planet is in peril, it's because of the lifestyles we lead, and burning fossil fuels is one of the biggest contributors to that. So if we care about biodiversity, if we care about loss of habitats, then we should be doing everything we can to minimize the impact our lifestyles are having on the planet. And fossil fuels is the big one. So switching from fossil fuels as quickly as you can is a really, really important thing that you can do to make a difference, but also something that you can do to start to inspire the millions of visitors you reach each year, and use yourself as an example to say, hey, we did it. This is why we did it. You should think about doing it. And if you have the opportunity, depending on what state you live in, help them to make that choice themselves. This is something that could be really, really important. Jeff and Michael, any?
Sure. I agree. I think, part of Mount Cuba Center's, the biggest part of Mount Cuba Center's mission is modeling behavior and then motivating action. And as Michael said at the beginning, between all of our botanical gardens, the number of constituents that we reach in any given year is massive. And I think a lot of us feel like botanical gardens are uniquely placed because we are about stewarding the environment and biodiversity to have a louder voice and kind of lead more of a community-based behavior change effort. And so I think, first, doing all that your garden can do and working with those at your garden to keep improving and thinking about these things. I know, there are some executive directors on this meeting, but a lot of you aren't. But I think, we all have to kind of think about how we can be influencers in our organizations to be able to start making those changes. And sometimes it's incrementally, and sometimes incremental things can lead to bigger things too. But I think in addition to modeling behavior, I think, it's important for us with our programming people to think about how do we get this information out to people, but then how do we try to ensure or see if there are ways that we can document whether or not our interpretive efforts are leading to behavior change amongst our constituents. It's a downstream thing that can be tricky to measure, but because Mount Cuba Center pays attention to that, we feel like we're able to have greater influence on our members and guests because we are taking the time to try to figure out whether people are changing how they actually think about things and what they're doing in their own backyards and at their houses.
I'm going to piggyback on what Jeff said about the programming and interpretation. I think don't be afraid of strong language either. I think, sometimes the message tends to get watered down after it goes through program or after it goes through marketing. And it's Earth Day, plant a tree, and that stuff is great, but there also needs to be much more of an urgency to our message. Use words like environmental crisis, use words like carbon pollution, really talk about the issue that's happening now. I use the analogy of, if you had visitors to your place and they were walking towards a cliff and they were going to go off the cliff, you wouldn't walk slowly up to them and whisper, guys, you might fall off the cliff. No, you would scream at them, hey, you're going to fall off this cliff. We are headed towards the cliff. And I think collectively as botanical gardens, we need to start screaming. We don't want to turn anybody off, but I think we need to be very powerful in our voice and our message, because if we don't do it, who will? Who will do this work? Who will motivate our visitors to change? And I think that was the whole point of the climate toolkit. This is what we can do as institutions. And then that's what you can do to get your visitors to model, to do that behavior when they go home. Because if they don't do it and it's just 600 gardens in the country doing it, then we're going to get nowhere.
Okay, were there any other questions, Annie?
No, there wasn't any more questions.
Okay, well, I want to thank Jeff and Michael for joining us today with this. I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. I want to encourage you to, sign up for the toolkit, share what you're doing. We can all learn from each other. That's the whole idea behind this. There's lots of things that are not on there that I know all of you are doing something that I think we can all learn from each other. And I'd also sign up for the newsletter as well. I'd also like to share something with you, just sort of a closing thought. And it's something that I learned from, let's see if I can get this to work, from Carol Sanford, who does a lot of work on regenerative thinking. And she talks about these 4 different paradigms for how we interact with the world or can interact with the world. And the first model she talks about is called the extractive model. And a person who exists in the extractive mindset sees the world as fragments there for the taking. And it's all about them. They don't care who they hurt or what they hurt in the process. As long as they get theirs, they're happy. You can think of this as like colonialism. The second model is called the less bad model. And in this model, the person still sees the world as fragments, but now they're trying to stabilize them. And it's not just about them anymore. They're starting to see a little bit about us, and they're starting to see some interconnectedness, and they're just trying to make things a little bit less bad. This is like where the environmental movement started. Okay, think about reduce, reuse, recycle. The third model is called the do good model. Again, the person in this model sees the world as fragments, but now they're trying to improve them. And it's about us, and they're starting to see some reciprocity, and they're trying to make things a little bit better. And some of the later green building certification programs kind of took this approach. The last model is called a regenerative model. And in a regenerative model, a person doesn't see the world as fragments, they see it as whole. And it's not about me, it's about us. It's about seeing everything as a system and everything's connected. And anything you do anywhere affects everything else. It's how nature works. This is how a lot of indigenous people think. And the main thing here is to see that we exist in nested wholes, that everything affects everything else. And this is the type of model that we're trying to move towards at FIPS. So in closing, I'd like to ask you to think about this. Which model do you think you fall under right now? And where do you want to be? So again, I'd like to leave you with that thought. And I'd like to thank you all again for joining us. And I hope that we can continue the conversation. Because I think as Michael said earlier, think of the millions of people we impact each day and each year. We can have a tremendous impact if we work together and really learn together to really address climate change and have a huge impact in this country. So thank you all very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Please let us know if there are any particular topics you'd like for the next webinar session as well, or for the newsletter. Okay. Thanks, everyone.